Yes, and of course there was discrimination was allowed at that time, I mean,
Yes.
because the Individual Rights Protection Act, which came in 72, I think, I may have my dates
Mm-hmm.
wrong, did not include sexual orientation. So you could discriminate against people like me.
My name is Ash Thompson.
My name is Harper Hugo.
My name is Brent.
Yes, my name is Michael Phair.
Mabuhay! My name is Melinda Verga.
We are Drag Out the Love, and you're watching Queer in Alberta.
Mwah.
Welcome back to the Queer in Alberta podcast, the podcast where I chat with 2SLGBTQIA plus Albertans from all across the province to share their stories. My name is Kels Valenzuela Delamarter. I'm your host. I use she, her pronouns, and we film this series on Treaty 7 territory in the city of Lethbridge, Alberta, home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, as well as the Oti-Pimsawak Métis government in the Alberta District Number 1. So our next guest is a local queer history treasure. Originally from Wisconsin, he moved to Edmonton in 1980 to pursue a job opportunity in early childhood education. He was the founder and first chair of the AIDS Network Society of Edmonton, and from 1992 to 2007, he was elected as a member of Edmonton City Council, becoming the first openly queer politician in Alberta. Today, he keeps busy as coordinator of the Edmonton Pride Senior Group and serves as chancellor of St. Stephen's College of the University of Alberta's campus. One noted achievement that he wishes to share is that the Imperial Sovereign Court of the Wild Rose bestowed him with the title Fairy Princess for Life. Everybody, please give a warm welcome to Michael Phair. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks very much, Cal. I was delighted to be here. And I'm on the Treaty 6 land property of Indigenous folks. And so we're delighted to be able to speak from this particular area as part of the program.
This is an extra special treat to be able to film here today with you. So thank you for making time for me.
No, delighted.
Yeah, and you know, the title Fairy Princess for Life, that's a pretty charming, pretty demure one. Before you sent over the bio, I'd never heard of the Sovereign Court of the Royal Rose either.
Oh, heavens. The court has been around 50 years. This next
No
year
way.
will be their 50th year. This is their Emperor, Emperor 49. The next one will be Emperor 50. That's normally in August that they have that. So they are they are one of the two longest serving organizations, queer organizations in Edmonton. And they've been amazing during all of that time. And like many organizations, a bit of up and down over time as well. But in the early 80s and 90s, and at times in the 2000s, as well as currently, they've been very active, very appealing to many people performing at different bars and clubs. These days, they perform all over town.
Mm-hmm.
They've been part of festivals. I've seen them, and in fact, I've been part of having them at a couple festivals that I've been involved in, and they're always great fun. And all of the funding that they raise goes to nonprofit charitable organizations.
Yeah.
And they really raise a lot of money. They do a great deal of work. I'm quite surprised. I got the title, I think, just because I was active with them. I was never part of the. I never took part in the as a queen at all. I had some of the outfits, but I never took part in any of the activities as such. But I've always supported the group, and they've always supported the things I've been involved in as well. I do tell that I think most people don't realize that when we started the AIDS Network of Edmonton, we were a group of 5 people that got together and started. And we had nothing, kind of thing. And the only group that had done anything before was the court had raised, I think it was about $800. I kind of forget, in some shows, which they then provided to us, and that was the only money we had when we started the AIDS Network of Edmonton, kind of thing. And that was the Queen's, and ever since then, I've been particularly interested and make sure that we include them as part of the community in many kinds of ways, and they've been really astounding.
Absolutely. And even just like I went and looked up their website and stuff, and it says that they are the 48th, so almost 50th, like you say, house of thems, femmes, irregular hems, and pussy willows. Like they do sound like absolute fun.
Oh, they're great fun. Everything they do is lots of fun. They recently had a celebration that was also a competition. It was outlandish. It was great fun.
Do you ever judge these competitions or come by?
I did not judge. One of the other people from our group did the judging, who was much more appropriate than me doing it.
I don't know. I feel like you'd be a good judge. I think it would be a good time.
It would be fun, is all I can say. They always are fun in that, too.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Well, I love getting to know more about your story and all these amazing organizations in Edmonton. But, for just even you and I, we met very recently right outside of Michael Phair Park. Oh. That's kind of a bit iconic, you think, to meet Michael Phair outside of the park named after him.
It's a city park, and I was fortunate that somebody or group put in the request that be named after using my name, and it happened. Mm-hmm. I have to say, I was really surprised. I had no idea anything like that happened. And most people that I know, comments are, "Oh, I thought they only named it after people who are dead." And I'm going, "No, I think
true.
I'm still here."
Yeah, I think you're still here. We can confirm.
Yes.
Well, you know what? I'm so glad we met that day because it brought us to this conversation now. And before we get right into the larger interview, I'm not sure if you're aware, Michael, but on the show, we play this game called Quick Fire Queer. So we're going to start it off. Basically, it's a fun lightning round where I ask you 5 fruity questions. And then you have 5 seconds to answer.
That's right, yeah.
You think you can do it?
Sure.
All right. He's ready. Well, here is Quick Fire Queer. For your first question, prepping for today, it's become clear to me that you do not shy away from a fashion moment. What is the accessory in your wardrobe that you simply cannot live without?
Socks.
Socks?
Yeah, socks. Colorful, sexy socks.
I never would have anticipated socks. Do you have some fun ones on? Well, you do. Those are good.
Yeah. That's a little showy.
I like it. Okay, I'm going to put that in my closet, some good socks. Question 2. On that note, with fashion, have you ever performed in drag?
Oh, yes, I've done that, but I've done it at home for some events that I've had. Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
So only at home, never in public?
No, never in public.
Ooh, do you think that's going to be the next foray?
I don't think so. I think those days are over.
Okay, I'll be holding out for you, but we'll see. Your third question is, Evolution Wonder Lounge is famously the only dedicated year-round queer space here in Edmonton. But out of all of the spaces that have come and gone, did you ever have a favorite?
Oh, Flashback was the favorite.
Flashback?
Too. Yeah. It was the biggest, best club in town, and better than any non-gay lesbian bars as far as that's concerned. It was very, very lively and great fun. And people had a wonderful time there. And it had a real tradition that I think that made it something very special in Edmonton. And it was recognized across North America as one of the best places to be.
Oh my goodness. Who would guess that? In Edmonton, Alberta.
Edmonton, Alberta.
Flashback.
Yes.
That was the place.
Yes.
All right, this is your last question. It is name one thing you admire about, your second last question. Name one thing you admire about the younger generation of 2SLGBTQIA plus folks in Alberta today.
I think what I would say in admiring is the trans community coming forward, being involved, trying to take back what's being stolen and taken away from them, and being there because it's so terribly important. And I find it very disconcerting all the stuff that's going on with that. But I also very much admire that a younger group are taking that on, and I think we'll succeed in the end of making sure that trans people are recognized and part of the community.
I think that's a really great one to point out, and for sure something we'll talk about more later in the interview, but I'm really happy to hear you say that. So your last question, though, is you have lived in Edmonton for many years now, but as we said, you were actually born in Wisconsin. What are your top 3 favorite things about the city of Edmonton that have kept you here all these years?
Oh, certainly the queer community is one of them. The second would be that by and large, Edmonton is a fairly progressive city, somewhat liberal, not terribly conservative. That would be another. And third was the job opportunities that I had while I was here. I was always somebody that was working either in education or in some related field all my life. So those would be the 3 best.
That was easy. And that is your quick fire queer, done and dusted.
Good.
Look at that. Easy and painless.
Yes.
it is so great to be talking more about Edmonton because I've spent most of my adult life and coming out in southern Alberta. So I feel like I'm really getting reacquainted with the community here. So maybe how would you say that the queer scene and community in Edmonton is maybe different from other places in Canada?
I think there are a couple of things that are make it a bit unique, and not necessarily in relation to other large cities, but because we are a large city, and in Alberta, there's ourselves in Calgary, but we're the northern one, and so I think we've attracted a lot of young people, or people who at least were young when they came to Edmonton, who were queer or saw themselves somehow not fitting in where they were, and I think that's something that makes Edmonton a bit unique. Also, our early history in Edmonton, in terms of people that came to the city, were primarily many groups from Eastern Europe, Ukrainian, etc.
Yeah.
And I think they brought a particular kind of culture, and I'm thinking of arts, music, that kind of thing that really are part of this city and always have been, kind of thing that makes it a bit unusual. We certainly have influence from the U.S., but not as much as some other cities that are closer to the border and had a little different background. I think the openness to different groups and folks, and particularly the gay community, and the politics around that is something that has kept me here as well. There's been a lot of work by a lot of people,
For sure.
hundreds of people that have made a difference, and I think that's unique as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it almost sounds like that close-knit community there is what you're getting at.
I think for in the 80s and 90s and the 2000s, it was quite a close community.
Yeah.
That it still is somewhat. It's a little different. All that was before the electronic age, which has changed things drastically.
Yes.
So, yeah, before that, it was always in person or telephone, kind of thing, and that, or going places and seeing folks, kind of thing that's changed in that. And so it's a different dynamic these days, I think, a bit.
Absolutely. And it just makes me think about how different generations of queer people have had to be resourceful in finding community.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, whether it was person to person, like knowing people in the real world, versus for this show even, it was born because of feeling alone and isolated, and then queer people connecting online with digital communities.
Right.
So there's always been that kind of savviness in finding each other, just different ways.
Oh, yes, there was. And that too. In the earlier history in the 70s and 60s and 70s in Edmonton, you had to know someone or whatever, and it was informal groups that got together. There was a bit of history of a few places, and particularly homes or apartments that queers got together with every a few weeks or whatever, partly known because the police kind of came a few times because they got fairly noisy and rowdy, kind of thing, and that
Of
happened.
course.
Yes, and then a couple of the bars, particularly in older at that time, the major hotels in the back where it was always dark in the lounge in the back.
Yep.
As long as you didn't make much noise or cause much trouble,
You were good.
certainly the bartenders had figured it out. You spent money, they were happy.
Exactly. The economy first and
Yeah,
foremost.
yeah.
But, I was actually going to ask you as a follow-up question there about maybe what the queer scene in Edmonton and Calgary was like during the 80s and 90s. It's not that long ago, but as you're saying, with technology and everything that's happened in the decades since, it feels so different.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. Yes. And of course, there was discrimination was allowed at that time.
Yes.
Because the Individual Rights Protection Act, which came in 72, I think, I may have my dates wrong, did not include sexual orientation. So you could discriminate against people like me. It meant that you could be thrown out of a job or not given a job because you were gay, lesbian. The apartments you couldn't get if the owner knew who you were and didn't want any gays there. And a place like McDonald's could refuse to give you a hamburger. I don't think they ever would have refused, but whatever. Some places would have refused to provide the services.
Yeah, no, it's unbelievable to kind of think about, which I think is a huge privilege of my generation to sit here and think, oh, that seems so, again, unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think it was most significant around employment. I think that there were many people who were terrified that if their employer found out they were gay or lesbian or queer, that they would get rid of them. And certainly that did happen. And there are cases of that have been documented. Was probably the most difficult area. I have heard, I cannot say for sure, back then a couple of persons that ran into difficulty in renting. And that may be the case as well. as services, I don't know that I remember much about that, but employment, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. And you've lived through so many of these changes, but let's maybe take it back a bit first.
Yeah.
When and why did you move to Alberta, Michael?
Oh, I was. I finished education degree, and I was working in Chicago and doing some part-time teaching at a community college, as well as working with kids directly. And a job came open in Calgary at the college there. I applied. I was offered the job, and I remember saying to my father, "I don't know, it's a long way," and blah blah blah, and him saying, "Oh, you're young. What have you got to lose? A year or two, that." And so I took the job in Calgary and I was there for 2 years, and then moved with a job with the Department of Education here in Edmonton, expecting to stay for 2 years and leave, and
here we are.
And here I am.
More than 2 years, I think.
Somehow I stayed.
That's so interesting. I mean, totally. That's even me with Lethbridge a little bit. I went there for school and then graduated, and I'm still there for the time being.
Yeah.
But I was going to ask you, I didn't realize that you went to Calgary first.
Yeah.
So did you not love Calgary when you were there and chose to leave, or what was the story?
Well, I have to. I didn't. It isn't that I disliked Calgary because it was such a significant change moving that far and blah blah blah. I think and because I was teaching full time at the college, I was really wrapped up in that
in your
work.
Yeah.
Because although I had done some sessional work before, I had not been full time, where part of the faculty and all the rest of it. I think the first year I was pretty. I was just pretty closed in, just doing all that kind of thing, and the second year, when I started to get to know people a little bit more and start to get a bit more involved a bit, I was offered the job here in Edmonton, and it was in an area of work that I was specifically interested in the education and
serendipitous.
Yeah. So I took it, and so I have nothing negative to say about Calgary. It's just it ended up being a stepping stone without me realizing that.
For sure, and it seems like Edmonton truly won your heart, though. In the end,
it did. Yes. I had a good time from early on.
Yeah, I know. My partner's family is always trying to convince us to move to Edmonton.
Yes.
I think you would get along very well with them.
Yes,
they all love it here. But, in looking at different interviews that you've done in the past, one thing that I noticed is that people don't seem to ask you too much about your life before coming to Alberta.
Yeah.
So one thing I've always been really curious is about representation for 2SLGBTQI plus folks.
Yeah.
I can already imagine what the answer might be, but what was that like when you were growing up in the United States?
Oh, well, I grew up in a town that's about the size of Red Deer.
Okay, yeah.
And there was nothing there, and I never heard about anything either. I remember somebody who was a part of a family that my family knew that was kind of ostracized, and it took forever for me to know what it was all about. That's the only thing I ever knew about that town. Then I went away to school to college and learned a teeny bit more. But even in those days, there wasn't a lot being done on colleges either, and universities and that too. So it was pretty
it's changed
clandestine.
so much even in the last 15 years.
Pretty quiet. And I wasn't out at that time either. I was, I would say, fooling myself. I look backwards, but at the time thinking, well, I don't know, maybe this is going to end or blah, 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 kind of thing.
I can be
and
straight.
Pretending. Which, as it turned out, I didn't do very well pretending, but at the time I thought I was.
Me either.
I know. That because I was finished school in Chicago, and when I was working there, and one of my sisters was living with me for a period when she finished and come to Chicago. And when I officially told her that I was gay, now this was like 3 or 4 years later, she said, "Oh, I knew that a long time ago. I woke up one night in the middle of the night when I was at your place and said, 'Oh, Michael's gay, isn't he?' And then I went back to sleep." I said, "What? How did you know?"
Easy,
"Oh,
like
knew."
bread and butter.
Yeah. And I said, "But you think the rest of my brothers and sisters?" "Oh, yeah, I think they all know." Kind of thing. That. So it was like, I wasted all that time. Anyway.
I so get that.
Yeah.
It's so funny, like for me, because I stressed about it a lot when I was about to come out for the first time. Yeah. And then some people, they were just like, oh, yeah, I knew.
Yeah,
I was just
yeah,
waiting for you to
yeah,
know.
yeah. I also learned something that I had never not expected. I also had a small group of 4 or 5 of us that did a lot of work together at university. And we were good friends and blah, blah, blah. And when I finally told them, it was after we had graduated, we were at a conference kind of thing and that, they were quite annoyed that I hadn't told them earlier. Why were you afraid with us? And how would you not have told them? Blah, blah. And I was like, oh, it never dawned on me at viewing that from a different perspective, that they knew there was something going on and I wouldn't talk about it. And so I was a bit taken back with that. I'll never forget that really, it was a good lesson for me.
You know, I actually relate to you on that one in the sense of I remember when I came out, I did it in Lethbridge first with my university friends.
Yeah, yeah.
I still had to do that with my family
and
with my people I'd grown up with who've known me my whole life.
Yeah.
There was one friend in particular that I was really nervous to share that with. Yeah. And so she was the last friend that I told, and she said the same thing after that. She was like, I wish you felt you could have shared that with me sooner. I don't know how I feel though, because I understand how she might be hurt by that, but at the same time, I felt scared a little bit, right? Yeah. So what do you think? Would you do it differently?
I think they were a little annoyed with me that I was for the same reason.
Yeah.
Like, we talked to all of us talked to me, and you wouldn't. It was always a piece of you wouldn't talk about. Nothing would come up in that. Like, well, I just that was not very smart on your part to think that. So So and it wasn't. However, fortunately, that little group has remained good friends still today.
That's beautiful.
That too, after all these years, and that too. So, because I didn't publicly come out until Edmonton,
definitely,
which was very different as opposed to people I knew or groups that I was with or whatever. Where here it was in the media,
big time.
Yes, and that was during the Pisces bath raids. Which happened on a Friday, Saturday weekend, May, June. It was the last day of May into June.
And I definitely want to ask you about the Pisces Bathhouse raid, because I feel like that is, when I look at interviews in your story, one of the main things that started a lot of this activism.
It was because I was part of the arrest was made during the midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning at the Pisces Bathhouse, and there were 56 of us or whatever that were there, and all we were all given a summons, federal offense, criminal offense as such, and then to the courthouse and et cetera, and that and as the night ended, because we spent all night with all this going on in the courthouse and blah blah blah, going home. I do remember driving back to where I am right now, where we're living, and hearing on the 7 o'clock news about the raid, and realizing that it wasn't over, kind of thing. That too.
Even after the ordeal itself, there was still more to come.
Yeah. And then on the next day, a couple of people got together a group to talk about what was going on in the rest, and I went to that particular meeting. I'd called Gay Alliance Towards Equality here in town, our group, and they said there was going to be this session that afternoon or evening at one of the places downtown, and I went to it, and at the end, a couple of people who had been kind of monitoring the outside said there was some media that wanted to talk to somebody that was there, and wondered whether you would talk to them. And I was like, I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah.
But the media were there, and they said, well, I said, I'm worried about who I am about, and said, well, we'll block your face so nobody can see you. We just do that. So I did the interview, and they blocked the face. So on the Monday, when I was at work in the Department of Education, I had a call from a woman that I worked with in Grand Prairie about something we were doing. And she said, oh, Michael, I saw you on TV last night. I said, what?
Anonymous what?
Oh, she said, I recognize your voice. I knew who you were, kind of thing. And that too. I was quite taken aback, I must say. Quite
an understatement.
So. Yes. And so then I... Then and the next day or so, I kind of debated internally and said, either I'm going to do this as myself or I'm not going to do it. And they decided I was going to do it.
Yeah.
And that was it. It was like that. Then I was involved in the media many times ever since, a variety of different kinds of things. But that was the first public time.
And very public.
Very public.
Very
Yeah,
public.
very public it was. Because
Yes.
then there were court cases and the courts and, oh God. And that was, yeah. And that was just with that. And, that was in 81. And then when AIDS came along, of course, it was...
Of course,
Yeah, a huge amount of that. And the AIDS galvanized hugely people in the queer community as well as others.
Yes.
And almost every group that was part of the queer community participated, sent volunteers, raised money, whatever. It also was that one of the very early people was a woman who worked in the media, not part of the community as such, but knew a number of folks. And she said to a few of us, you should have a little, and she volunteered, we should have a little session with you all about how best to deal with the media.
Which is a huge gift.
It was. I'll never forget some of it. It was so useful because most of us, including myself, didn't have a clue. And they were simple, straightforward things. Remember, media they have a timetable. You can't tell them you'll call them back next week. That doesn't help. Second, they only want 2 or 3 points. They don't want the whole history kind of thing that too. And third, you don't ever have to answer anything you don't want to answer either. Kind of thing that they'll make you think you have, but you don't have to do that.
And it's better to not say anything if you're not confident.
I would say we became quite adept at doing that. And I would say that after the first year of AIDS, by and large, the media here was very positive about us.
About the work you
anytime
were
there was
doing.
anything about AIDS anywhere in North America that got in the media, they would call us. And we knew we had to do stuff. And they were always very friendly and nice. The media was a big, it made a lot of it possible for what we were able to do.
Something that's really shocked me, Michael, actually, is that, of course, anyone who's familiar with queer history in Alberta has probably heard your name. But I noticed, like in southern Alberta, when I would say that I'm going to interview Michael Phair, some younger people aren't as familiar with your story.
No.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to do today is that for folks that are hearing about the Pisces Bathhouse raid, about you and these raids for the first time, can you help us understand what the social climate was like at that time frame, as well as what these raids were about and why they were happening in the first place?
Yeah. Well, that was a culmination of the late 1970s and very early 1980s. And it was happening in Toronto and Montreal as well, before it happened here in Edmonton. And the notion was that people who were gay and lesbian, and particularly gay men, were nasty and ugly and sinful and all that kind of good stuff. And bathhouses is where many gay men went, supposedly to exercise and have a bath kind of thing.
Hygiene.
What actually happened was a fair bit different than that as such. And so, and with the political drive at the time of, cleaning up those kinds of things in cities and in Toronto and Montreal and others there, it was assigned to the police. And here we had the formation of a morality squad.
Yeah.
Now, whatever you define morality as, I haven't a clue.
Very vague.
Anything that I think it was anything they wanted to do, but whatever. It's hard to know. So the Edmonton police indicate that they had a complaint by someone. I've always questioned that, but maybe they did. Who knows? So the Edmonton police decided to go after the largest gay bathhouse in Edmonton, which is Pisces. And for 6 months before, they were in the building next door. It was dark, and they would check off the the license plates of people of licensed cars that they saw there. They photoed people who were going in and out of the place and keep records on all of this. And they also had undercover police officers that would go in every now and then and spend part of the evening. It was, they were always very ugly men, and you would have never gone near them anyway. But they would go in, kind of thing, that as such. So the police decided to do a raid. They got the RCMP to join them. And they also got the legal system, the court system, so that when they did the raid, they had someone there from the court who actually issued the summons right there, and took photos of each of us with our name on as well, and then put us in paddy wagons. By this time, it was 2:30 in the night, or in the morning at that point. Took us to the courthouse, which was downtown at that time, and then to certainly my surprise and everybody else, they had a judge come out with somebody else from the court and say, blah, 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 we're going to interview you, each of you, and you need to tell us, answer the questions that we give, and we'll do one at a time. And there was a lot of, wait, what? We need security. Shouldn't we have a lawyer first? Blah, blah, blah. So squawking going on. And so they said, whatever you say will not be used against you. And then they left. And the buzz in that room, including myself, was, oh, this is awful. And I was personally a bit angry at myself because I knew the raids were happening in Toronto and Montreal, and I hadn't really studied what and why and what they were doing, because they were being fought in those cities by the community as well, that I just didn't know much. So probably about 5 o'clock in the morning or a little bit after, the judge and this person came back, and they'd interviewed, I don't know, 15 people out of the 50, maybe a bit more. And they said, that's enough. We don't need it anymore. And then, of course, what they hadn't told us is that, yes, they couldn't use that information against you, but they could use it against everybody else.
Oh, my
kind
gosh.
of thing of that. So,
and like the orchestration of it, right? You're saying this is 2:30, 3 in the morning. Like, I was reading about how it was so preemptively planned that all these people were there in the middle of the night.
Oh, yeah.
Ready.
And so we were all, people like myself and everybody else was, pretty exhausted. We've been up all night and all this. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And
Scared.
we got summons to that, and it's a criminal offense. And you end up with a criminal offense on your record, kind of thing in that too. So it was quite, I think, quite traumatic as the night and morning started, kind of realizing the depth of this and what this would mean. And in the general times, bathhouse raids were not seen as something that was particularly bad, and the people we found were not good. A little bit of what happened in Edmonton was that, first of all, there were no charges of anybody having alcohol or nobody having drugs, or nobody being drunk as well. The only charge was being a found in, meaning you were there at the time. That's all you had to be. There was nothing about any other activity going on, just that you were there physically, because that's the way the federal law at the time read.
Yeah, I kept seeing that word, found in, and I was thinking, what does that even
well,
mean?
See, it was done for basically for around prostitution and women and saloons and stuff back in the early days, is where that came from, kind of thing. And that's the way they used it then, as a found in. So the media started. There was some people who wrote into the media, and then some columnists in the Edmonton media that said, so there were 63 police officers that went to arrest 56 men, and there was no charge except they were found in. Is that best use of our police service?
Good question.
So there was a bit of a pushback, I think, that was totally unexpected.
That the police didn't expect.
Yeah, and there were probably I don't know, but there were probably 15 or 18 of us that pleaded not guilty, meaning we'd have to go to court. And a
Right.
number that pleaded guilty, and they were fined eventually, but they had a charge against them, a federal a criminal charge on their record. And I was one of those that went to trial. So that was all rushed. The first trials were in August. You remember this? This was in the beginning of June. This is how fast this went. And it was a farce. I mean, I attended it and that too. And the police were showing photos of magazines that were in there, and anyway, and the rooms, and
It's like a witch hunt,
it was
you
like,
know?
But they also had photos of persons going in and out, and license plates. So they could. It was enough to show that yes, that person was in the place, and that's all you had to be. So that first trial, the person, and it was that one was a bit lengthy because there was stuff tried, a number of things tried. The person was found guilty, and after that, I think there were only about 5 of us that decided to still go to trial. Rather, a number of those that had pleaded not guilty decided to plead guilty.
And was that just, fear or?
Well, we saw what the results were, and they could be the
Right.
same thing for us. And so, for me, probably the most difficult part of that whole thing was my lawyer, who had done the first trial as well, who I'd gotten to know real well, is a great person, said to me, "You don't need me as a lawyer. You can do it yourself. You know what's happening. You've been there, you've seen it." And I was like, "Ooh." So I defended myself.
I can't believe that.
And that was daunting. I still can't believe I did that. And then
Do you get to call
I never
yourself
said
a
I
lawyer
wouldn't do
now?
that. In theory, when the person doesn't have a lawyer doing it, it's expected the judge assists a bit if necessary. And I had to ask that if the judge said, blah, blah. He said, "Well, yeah," and I said, "You're supposed to be helping me a bit." Oh, yeah, back. So found guilty, and then he wanted to come down with the verdict, and I said, "Oh no," I said, "I want to plead my case for being let go." Or I didn't use the
Guilty.
word "let go" himself. That it said, I need a couple of days to prepare that. I'm not ready for that part yet. So he had to put it off. And so I had a number of people send letters, and I spoke about why I should be incarcerated or
Yeah.
found guilty, kind of thing, and that
Yeah,
too.
people sent
Not
letters for your
found guilty.
character.
So then my lawyer said, "Now we'll take this to appeal court." She said, "I think we can win at the appeal court." That didn't happen until a year later, and by then there was no talk about any of this anymore. It was all done and over. And then I was fortunate at the appeal court. I was successful, and so I had no charge then against me.
Yeah.
And that it's as if it didn't happen.
And can I
kind of
ask you for today, is that the same for everybody else who went through that raid and the court processes? Has everyone been appealed?
Well, the current federal government a couple of years ago apologized for some of this, and then there has been work to get those cases now because they've been cases across the country. I'm not sure all of them have been erased at this point yet, but they've been systematically getting them erased, and I just don't know how far along that is.
So it's still ongoing.
I think it's still ongoing. It may be all done. I don't know.
We'll have to
because
check.
they were doing it for all cities that had raids. At the time, there were 6 or 7 or 8. I can't remember, kind of thing. And some of them, like Toronto, there were some hundreds.
Yes.
Kind of thing, that too. So, and so you have to find the stuff. You have to find the person's blah, 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 kind of thing, that too. So, I'm not sure that's completed or not. But it is happening for everybody now.
I think it just makes it that much more amazing that your case was able to be
I was
appealed.
fortunate.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate. So Pisces was a big deal, and I think it
Definitely.
yes, I think it had 2 other things. I think one is that before Pisces, if you asked most Edmontonians whether there were gay lesbian people in Edmonton, they would have said no, there's
No.
nobody, kind of thing that. Even though there were lots of us, kind of thing that everywhere, kind of thing that too. And now that that I think that really erased that day. I think the other was that many of us in the queer community, including myself, always thought that if you were just kind of quiet, stayed below the radar,
You'd be okay.
we'd be okay. And it was like, no, that ain't going to work.
Yeah.
And so there was a real blossoming different groups, gay groups, sports, religion, the church groups, blah blah blah. That started and really grew during that period of time, kind of thing. So that when AIDS came, which was far worse, kind of thing, that there were a lot of gay lesbian groups across the city that were prepared to take part and really galvanize it, tried to pull stuff together around that.
That story, Michael, that you lived through at the Pisces Bathhouse, that's in 1981 or 1982, do you remember?
I came here I came here in 80, and this was it been 81, I think.
81?
Yeah, because it was March, April. I came in September, that school year.
Yeah.
I think of 80, and this was in May, June, so I think 81.
It's just mind-blowing.
But I get years mixed up. It's been too many years. It's like, I don't know.
Even for me, I get years mixed up, and I haven't had quite as many yet.
I know. I can't remember.
Yeah, but I was going to say, like, 1981, 1982, realistically, it's not that long ago.
It isn't that long ago if you look at it from that perspective, and I look at it, I think that was a long time ago, and that wasn't very bright kind of thing. I didn't know what I was doing, kind of thing, but we lived through it, and we made some progress as a result of it. We became more politically conscious as well. We got to make some changes that affect us so they can't happen.
Well, like you were saying, you thought perhaps the sentiment was, if we just stay under the radar, don't make a fuss, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And then you're suddenly facing all of these charges for being a found-in, this ambiguous moral police, all of these sorts of things. I was reading, and I would have to verify this to be 100% sure, but I think I was reading about how that number of 60 or so people, regardless of whether it was for queer people or just people in Alberta, it's one of the largest raids by the police in history.
Yeah, it was the largest. Yeah. Names got somehow the media got a hold of the names, and the names were put on one of the TV stations,
like blasted,
scrolled the names, kind of thing, that as well at some point too. And there's all kinds of stories about people or that were indications that a couple of individuals committed suicide. I can't confirm that. I don't know that happened. I can confirm that a number of people that I knew left Edmonton by the next day or the end of the next day and have never returned, kind of thing. They went to Vancouver, somewhere else in the country.
Just disappeared.
Yeah. That they didn't stay because they saw it as problems, and that if they were just gone elsewhere, they could leave it behind, and they did leave it behind.
Well, and that's so different from what happened for you. You chose to stay and then obviously become very publicly known. But something that you've talked about when you've done other interviews is that you kind of were, even just today you said it, you were a bit nervous about taking that space. What did that feel like to just suddenly go for it? Well,
it was all, man, I say it was a little bit, as I said, was personal. I wish I knew more. By the time I was driving home, I was a bit tired. I have to say, when it came up on the news, on the radio, in my car, and that really hit me as a jolt. And it was like, this is not over.
Yeah.
This is still big time. There's going to be lots more happening yet. And you don't know. I don't know. You have a much sense of what this means, kind of thing, that too. And I got to find out and figure out what I'm going to do.
Where do you find bravery when you're surrounded by things that are really big and really scary?
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a tough answer. Why and that? Because I don't think I kind of thought that I would have that kind of bravery. I think it was probably coalescing around a few things. One is that I was fortunate that I had finished education. I was working. I was making a living. I could survive. Physically funny. Plus, I had a number of good friends, a number of people in the queer community that I knew well and was active, et cetera, and that too, to kind of provide support. And I think when it came down to it, was like, well, either, you do it or you don't do it, and make a decision and get moving. Kind of need that too. So I did, and then got involved with trying to make things happen. Mm-hmm. If I did it again today, I don't know. But
if you could do it.
I know. It's who knows.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we were talking about the raid and then a bit about the work that you did during the AIDS crisis and HIV. But then also in 1992, you had your run for city council.
Yes, I did.
And you know, I want to show you this photo here that I found from the Edmonton Queer History Project. Can you describe into the microphone a bit of what you see here?
Yes.
What's going on?
A Phair Shake. Oh, this was the summer parade that was held in White Avenue every year, and this was the year I ran for city council. And we put in this little parade, a Phair Shake. We had somebody dressed as pepper and somebody dressed as salt.
No way.
Okay, yeah, and that was the notion of a Phair Shake.
That makes
What can I
so
say?
much more sense.
Yes, so that's why it was done. That was just to promote my name.
I love
Kind
that.
of thing too. And part of it was that people needed to know how to spell my name, because if they looked for an F, they wouldn't find me on the thing there. And I've got a name that sounds one way but is not spelled that way. So every chance we could, we used my last name so people get used to seeing that.
I love that. And just even the fun of it, it seems like people got really excited and
we
enthusiastic about your campaign.
Yeah, we did that. We went down straight. I was waving at people, whatever.
The fairy princess.
Yeah.
Well, and then here there's also the attached article that I'm not sure who this is with. Maybe the Edmonton Journal?
This might be, who is the...
It says
David Staples, wasn't it?
Yeah, David Staples.
Yeah, it would be the Journal.
Okay, and it says, of course, sexuality not an issue, gay candidate says, which I think it's interesting that you were labeled as the gay candidate.
Of course. Yes. So that's why it wasn't an issue.
Exactly. Well, that's what I was going to point
out.
out.
I know. Of course it was an issue. But obviously... It was, and it wasn't in one sense. It was because I was labeled that all the time. At the same, it would be that the area I represented had about 130,000 people in it, and believe me, if there were more than 20,000 that knew I was gay, it would have been a miracle. I mean, most people didn't know who I was, and wouldn't know whether I was gay or not. The other is that we ran a really good campaign. I was clear, and not just me, of course, because that if I was going to do this, we were going to do a good job. By the last 2 weeks, I wanted to win.
Yes, that's exactly what you said.
I wasn't interested in losing anymore at all. I was real clear. I changed my tune.
I love that.
I'm going to win.
Well, even that's exactly what you said within the Journal article. I'm going to read the quote here. You said, "My sexual orientation is no secret, nor is it an issue. I am proud of who I am, and I am here to win."
Yeah.
I think that media training that you had really shows, and this is such a smart way to not make it like it's not an issue, it's not something I'm ashamed of, it's who I am, and I'm going to win.
Who I am, yeah. Yeah, when we started the campaign, our campaign team, the key people, kind of got together quite early on, probably in May or June. There was a little bit of internal discussion whether we should pretend that I wasn't gay or use that and that, and I said it's too late.
How can you?
I know, and everybody agreed. And said, it's the usual thing. Well, maybe, maybe. But when I said no, it's too late, everyone said, okay, fine, let's just go. And I think that too. So I was the gay candidate.
And the gay candidate won.
And I did win. I was, yes. Boy, and those days, that was before polling was done, kind of thing and that. And we didn't have any idea in our campaign until the last probably 10 days, when all of a sudden, as a candidate and people working there, we had people stopping in to get signs and get literature that people we didn't know at all, this and that, and it was like, oh, and people dropping off money because it cost the money. That it was like, oh my God. So somehow we a bit of a sense that things were going more than maybe we thought, because I think there were 8 or 9 people running in that ward that time. So. It's hard to know, and we won.
You won. And I think your win is not an understatement to say that has helped pave the way for the queer politicians that we see in Alberta legislature today. Can I ask you, how does that feel to now see more people openly in that space?
I think we helped to break that notion a bit. And I think also actually being a member of council and doing things at the city, and doing many things that have to do with keeping snow off the roads and kind of thing, all that kind of junk
The
stuff
fun
you have to
stuff.
do. Yeah, that's part of. But also then making sure that the policies of the city in terms of employment were clear about accepting people who were queer as employees and not and you can't get rid of them or whatever. Not only that, but some other things in that too. So it had, and one of them, which was which was amazing. So in probably the first year I was there or a little after, I had a person who worked in the city administration in one of the areas called me and wanted me to, so we chatted, and he was interested in having benefit for his partner. That's same-sex benefits kind of thing, which was not available kind of thing at all. And I was like, I didn't know much of that. So I had to scout around for what I could find out. And the issue was, the issue that needed to be dealt with is those kinds of things were all part of bargaining.
Okay.
So I got back to this fellow and a couple of others that were his and said, listen, this needs to come forward within a union bargaining kind of thing in that. And then it will get on the table kind of thing in that as well. So they did. It came on the table kind of thing in that. The city administration figured out what the cost would be if it was taken up, and that was practically nothing in overall budget, practically nothing. And in the end, when the bargaining was completed, the city passed the agreement, which included same-sex benefits. And the only benefit was health care, because that was provincial and the province wouldn't give in on that.
Right.
Of course. Right. But all the others were available for same-sex partners then.
Yeah, and you saw so many of those big shifts. Like we talked about earlier, was it the Delwyn?
I never guessed it.
You never would have guessed
person
it.
hadn't come and said, it was like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the common one that you hear is that people who maybe lived like a generation or two before me often were like, we never thought we would even see same-sex marriage happen within the lifetime, right?
No, nobody at that time thought they'd get married either. I mean, we never thought, I didn't. Most people I know didn't ever think they'd be able to get married, but who knew?
Who knew?
Yeah.
You've seen so much change throughout your life. Like even in 1969, I think the Everett Clippert case had been going across Canada, where homosexuality was decriminalized.
Yeah.
Then we have the raids. Then we have everything with the AIDS and HIV epidemic, and then even the protections that we have against discrimination that you were talking about.
Discrimination, changing of the legislation, the Delwyn Reed case. That which was significant for that, because it affected the whole country, that decision.
Yes.
And then marriage not too long after that.
Exactly. Like there are so many things that we could ask you about. And I think, as we were chatting about earlier, it could be a multi-podcast series with the stories that you could tell.
Yes.
But I wanted to be mindful of time and leave some room for audience questions that I have been telling you about. Yeah. So the first one is actually from someone named Conrad in Calgary. And Conrad wants to ask you if you are excited by any young politicians or movements happening right now.
Any young person or politician happening right now? Well, certainly a couple of the people that are involved in the trans that I know a bit are people I admire. And one or two of them, because they are quite clearly seeing that this is going to be a tough long-term work that needs to be done. And
absolutely.
I think that's something that I unfortunately think they're right on that. It isn't going to happen just overnight, kind of thing. That too. So I admire them in politicians. Blake Desjardins, who is gay at the federal level from here, in that wonderful person.
Could you say the name again?
As well. We need another 20 like him.
Could you say the name of this individual again? I'm not sure if I know who they are.
Desjardins is his last name, Blake.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And he's a federal, he's an NDP federal person that won here in Edmonton, is in the parliament right now. And he's done a great deal, and he's just a really good person, I think. And by my standards, relatively young.
Relatively young. All right. Well, your next...
Depends. Yeah.
Yes. Your next question is also from someone in Calgary. This is from Kennedy. And they want to ask you, was there a turning point in time where you knew that things were changing for the better? That the realities you'd experienced when you were growing up might not be the exact same for people that were younger?
The terrible experience with AIDS, which was awful, um, also was a bit of a turning point as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that because the media did so much of that with us, and we did as an organization and the rest of that too, but I think many Edmontonians started to see us in a very different light. Um, uh, that volunteers, people dying, all that, is something that I think rang with people. And then people died alone because their family wouldn't take them or have them, whatever. It was like,
Mm.
it just, that does not resonate well with most people. Something
Yeah.
is wrong at that point, and it shouldn't be like that. So I think there was some of that. I think I felt a bit was it would be likely we could get some other things done then. And I think we were active doing that. Even during the worst of the AIDS here in Edmonton, we I was part of GALA, which is Gay Alliance, Gay and Lesbian Alliance, Gay and Lesbian Association, I
Yes.
think. Yeah, which was a not a, it was a nonprofit group, but it was particularly involved with rights and that stuff. And that we were very active during that time as well, and pushing hard in that as well. And I was part of that group, and met with numerous politicians and boards and all that kind of stuff as well, pushing. And I think that a little bit of that with what was happening with AIDS and people and that, I think was a bit of a turning point for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I had so many questions for you, but there was a key theme with a bunch of them. I had multiple people say that essentially this is summarized in one question from this person. This is Dree in Lethbridge, who speaks for everybody. What advice do you have for being resilient during times of political pushback against us?
Yeah, don't give up. Now I can say that because there was certainly we certainly were refused by many politicians, many ministers, and many other
Mm-hmm.
advocates of that, and we kept at it. I think the other advice I would give is that it is a process. It is significant, and you need to think it through. So that you are pushing at it in a number of ways. That you also look for allies, other groups in that will support or take part in it. We were always fortunate that many of the unions would take part, and a number of other groups, that religious groups that would as well. And I think the value of allies is sometimes forgotten. In that as well, that you aren't there by yourself. You want to work together, and it's easy for me to talk about all these things without anyone else here to say, listen, you didn't do much. It was all the rest of us. Because yeah, it was all the rest of you
Mm-hmm.
that did all the work, kind of thing. That wasn't me by myself by any means, kind of thing. In that, and I think that's one of the other realities that it takes a lot of people working together to make change.
Yes, absolutely. And this is my last question for you today, but it's from Sam, and they want to ask you, how do you continue to foster queer joy through the different seasons of your life?
Oh, it's like, why not?
Easy.
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
not?
I get a little jaded at everything is bad, nothing's working, it's awful, and certainly there are problems and issues. But every day of the week, we got in Edmonton, we have thousands of kids that go to school every day and are learning. We have thousands that go to hospitals and get care. We have thousands of people go grocery shopping and they buy food that they can eat and use, and with others and that too. And I realize that there are people where there are certainly some difficulties. But, when you look at Canada and I look at Edmonton, the world that we live in, um, we aren't in the midst of a war. We don't have people being randomly shot or killed,
Mm,
generally, in any kind of massive way. We have to be careful with some things, but yeah, sure. Um, but there's a lot, I think, it could be I'll be one of those people that as soon as the days get longer, will be, oh, wonderful. And then, seeing leaves and flowers bloom again, kind of thing. And then I think is all part of saying how wonderful this is, how enjoy. And I think for a lot of people during Christmas season, a lot of it is joy. I mean, they had a good time eating, they had a good time with friends and people that one needs to cherish. That's what life is also part of. And I think that it's important. You know, why drag yourself down, kind of thing. In that life is tough enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we all have the obstacles to face and go through, but yeah, we go through them and keep moving, kind of thing. In that too.
I like that.
So I'm a bit cautious about people about everything's so bad, everything's awful. It's like, so what's eating you up these days? You're still having lunch, aren't you? Kind of thing in that. And you got a bed that tonight you're going to be in, kind of thing in that. You saw a movie last night, kind of thing. You're going to Mexico in July, not July, January, kind of thing. Then July, maybe not, kind of thing that. And I'm like, so anyway, so yeah, I think you look at it. It's not everything's going to be perfect, but so what? On you go.
I think that's a really encouraging reminder, because I think a lot of younger people are feeling intimidated and scared with, like we've talked about, the anti-trans sentiment, anti-drag that we're seeing even right here at home. But hearing that you feel that, like, still looking for the positive and still the ways that we can reach each other, I think that's really, really inspiring, especially with what you've seen.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
It's all part of it.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Michael.
Thank you.
This has been, like, for me, just, it's so fulfilling to chat with somebody that's experienced the things that you have. And I don't have many queer elders in my life. So thank you for making the time for me.
As I said earlier, some of us live too long. Is the real story.
But you get to have good socks. I feel like I need to get my sock game up to be able to compete with you.
I do.
Yes. Could you do me a favor, Michael? Could you look into that camera and say, my name is Michael Phair and you're watching Queer in Alberta?
Yes, my name is Michael Phair, and you're watching Queer in Alberta.
Perfect. That's a wrap. Coming up next on Queer in Alberta.
Whenever I think about Bonnieville, I think of a time when I was sneaking out.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Sneaking out to meet boys in Farmers Field.
No, you were not.
Is bad. Like, because that's the only place you can go on dates.
Why did everyone else get to have fun in a small town but me?
Local queerness. Also, shout out to